that your life is being framed by the boldest faith confession that you have ever made that you actually believe. And my example was to preach to hundreds of millions of people. And so all of my life, it might not look like things are related, but they are. If you have your aerial view and your view outside of the realm of time, God knows everything is connected and related, even to the examples I gave earlier. People are moved into your life based on that confession. People are moved out of your life based on that confession. People are measured how long they're allowed to be in your life based on that confession that you believe. I know that's a whole other. Circumstances are allowed to come or not, or stay, or based on that. So you want to make sure you're saying the boldest faith confession you can come up with. What can you believe God for? What is beyond you that you can believe Him for? What is impossible to you right now? If it's not impossible, it's not God, because then you don't need Him. But if it's impossible, that's what you should be confessing and speaking and believing. And so when I made that faith confession in agreement with Bishop in Ghana, I remember we were coming out the side door of his house on the way to a meeting. I remember like it was yesterday when we said that. Because he corrected me. I said, I'm going to speak to millions. He says, no, Brother Eric. It's going to be hundreds of millions. The Lord has told us. And you're going to raise the dead. I missed my opportunity. But you won't. He showed me you won't miss yours. And so uh, uh, we go on radio. And they claim to have a potential listening audience of 1 million people on that Worthington station. Then we filmed the 12 one-minute spots for TV in Knoxville. They claim to have a potential viewing audience of 2.2 million. We were faithful in Florida to go on the radio and do a little 180 interview show for free. Then we were faithful to pay bills to be on the radio out in Worthington. I have yet to have some type of natural encouragement that measures to the degree of the commitment to make me feel good about it, if that makes sense. Yet it's faithfulness to Him with seemingly no reward. And then the 12 spots to the TV, I have yet to have a measured response, And yet now here all of a sudden, here comes a radio interview that can lead to much more, Ephesians 3:20, with a potential listening audience in the immediate of 11 million people. These things are not coincidental to take you to this place of bold faith confession of hundreds of millions of people. And with that said, there's a lot going on right now in terms of restoration. I've gotten a text, a phone call, or an email or something from a serious handful of people that have been on some level in opposition to me in the past. And it has just all come, just full circle. It is remarkable. It really is. And you almost don't know what to do with yourself. It's like, huh. And I woke up this morning thinking about how Brother Hagin would say sometimes we just stumble into some things. We're not quite sure how we got there, but in a good way. And I thought, we have stumbled into some things and triggered because you can't get here without faith and love. And so, with that said, I thought that maybe we would go a little further in this message and cover some things here. So, go to Psalm chapter 19, verse 1, and we'll start there. And as you're turning to Psalm 19 and 1, I want you to walk with me through some talking points. Psalm 19:1 says, "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and the expanse of heaven is declaring the work of his hands." The title of this message is One Day, and it's centered around the idea of what can God do in one day. Does God talk about what he'll do in a particular day, on a particular day? And how specific can God be? How specific can the Holy Spirit be? And, you know, there are 6 different events that are taking place or have taken place that we need to talk about. And from these talking points, we'll have a better understanding of what God is trying to do here in this blood moon situation, I guess is the best way to say it. And I've got a picture attached to the bottom of this message right here. Maybe if you can put my picture. I don't know if you can see this picture or not. We'll turn. Let's see if they can see the picture on the Ustream. But if you're looking at this picture, I'll try to get it so everybody can see it. This is the 2014-2015 Jewish holiday eclipse schedule. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 images up here. But most of the world is talking about 4 images, the tetrad, or the 4 blood moons. Consequently, guess what today is? Today on the Jewish calendar is the beginning of the year 5776. It's actually the first day of the year. They believe the earth began on October the 6th, on the evening, 5,776 years ago. It's kind of neat when you think about the earth was made in 7 days, or 6 days, and God rested on the 7th, and people use that to say that there's a 6,000-year lease on the earth. And if the Jewish calendar is at 5776, we're nearing the end of that lease. And that means, you know, the devil has a right to be around because of what Adam did, but he doesn't have a right to dominate us because of what Jesus did. And then in just a few short years, he won't even be allowed to be around. And so, anyway, I think it's interesting. But what we're looking at here in these 6 images, if you can see them, is every 6 months, starting back in March of 2014, on Passover of March last year was the first blood moon. 6 months later, in the Feast of Tabernacles, there was another blood moon in October. Then, in March of this past year on the 20th, there was a total solar eclipse. Then, in April of this year was the 3rd blood moon, and that occurred on Passover again. Then, last night, September 13th, there was a partial solar eclipse. Then, the next blood moon is coming up on October the 28th. And these are 6 events in the heavenlies that we want to talk about, and this is a part of our radio broadcast that's coming up the 22nd on Tribe Family Channel out of Los Angeles with Dwan Smith. And why do we want to talk about these events? What is the purpose? And I will want to start by making a kind of a disclaimer. When we go over these events, we're generally talking to one of 2 people. The listeners will be one of 2 people. There's a third group, but we're not really directing specifically to them because it's not necessarily necessary. Although it's good to hear what you know again and hear it fresh, we're focusing on two groups of people: the unlearned or the untaught, and the unbeliever. And I get that from 1 Corinthians chapter 14 when it's talking about tongues. You know, in the church, we have a vocabulary that if you are not a Christian and haven't been one for some time, you might have no idea. We might as well be speaking a foreign language because you just don't know. And even if you have been a Christian for a while and you don't understand the language of faith, we might as well be speaking in tongues to you. And so why I say the untaught or the unbeliever as our two big audience groups, we're not really talking about the ones that already know what we know. They can listen in and it's good to hear it fresh, but we're focusing our efforts on two groups. And because watch this right here. You go to 1 Corinthians chapter 14, and we're going to look at verse 24. And he's talking about tongues versus prophecy in the local church service. He says, we'll start verse 23. Therefore, if the whole church assembles in all, I tell you what, let's start verse 22. Thus unknown tongues are meant for a supernatural sign, not for believers, but for unbelievers on the point of believing. While prophecy, inspired preaching and teaching, interpreting the divine will and purpose, is not for unbelievers, but on the point of believing, but for believers. Therefore, if the whole church assembles and all of you speak in unknown tongues, and the ungifted and uninitiated or unbelievers come in, will they not say that you are demented? But if all prophesy, giving inspired testimony and interpreting the divine will and purpose, and an unbeliever or untaught outsider comes in, he is told of his sin and reproved and convicted and convinced by all, and his defects and needs are examined, estimated, and determined, and he is called to account by all. The secrets of his heart are laid bare, and so falling on his face he will worship God, declaring that God is among you in very truth. And so Paul says we prophesy in a known language, a language everybody can understand, so that the unbeliever or the untaught outsider comes in and they'll understand what you're saying. And so we want to present the blood moon phenomenon in a language that both of those groups can understand. And so we're going to preface some of this with some qualifiers, if you will. So we're talking about 6 events in the heavenlies that have already taken place or are about to take place. And it's happening in the heavenlies, so there's not a person on earth who's outside the realm or the scope of its effect and its performance. And I find it ironic that on no other planet in our solar system do these things take place. We are the only planet in the solar system that has eclipses of any kind. In other words, Psalm 19:11 says the heavens declare the glory of God. They are telling us of his handiwork. Well, it doesn't happen on other planets because there's not life there. They happen on our planet because God is speaking to humans through these signs and these events. And I want to make two specific points here. Because why should I even care that there is a blood moon or there is a solar eclipse or a partial eclipse? What does it even matter? Well, first of all, God is speaking. And when God speaks, it matters. And what you need to know about God speaking is God speaks in love by faith to mankind. And so God's heart and God's motive behind these supernatural phenomenon is to express his love by faith and to reach us right where we are. You know, if you look at 2 Corinthians 5 and 7, it says, we, talking about the church or believers, walk by faith and not by sight. And it's not, but what we want to qualify this is not telling us to walk around with our eyes closed and not use our physical eyes. I mean, if you're trying to cross the street and you see a car coming, you better be walking by sight. We're talking about walking by faith in the way you live your life. Faith in an unseen God in the seen realm. And so, because God knows that the majority of humans on the earth do not walk by faith, he reaches them because he is a heart of love and he reigns on the just and the unjust, and he meets us where we are. He uses physical things to talk to us. You know, it goes all the way back to Abraham. Abraham is from a moon-worshiping community. And so what does God use to speak to Abraham with? The stars in the sky. Because Abraham is already looking up, worshiping them anyway. God's got his attention in that way, so he meets him where he is. And then if you go over to astrology, astronomy, the New Age movement, even the Muslim faith has a crescent moon on it. I mean, people are looking up. They're looking at the sky for some sort of insight, some sort of direction. Even the birth of Jesus was followed by a star over the baby, and Magi came from the east and followed the star. If you go to Luke, Jesus says, when I return, will I really find faith in the earth? So there is a question in the mind of Christ concerning humans and the earth in his return. Will I really find faith? And since he already knows that by and large the majority of the earth is going to be weak in faith, he has predetermined that he would meet them in the sight realm. I mean, so why is there these things taking place? Because God is a loving God. That's when you it's not to scare us, it's to receive his love. And because these blood moons coincide with the feasts of Israel, if you're smart, you'll see these signs in the heavens as a call to a feast, a call to a love feast. Ultimately, it's to develop a relationship with his son, Jesus Christ, to take you to the marriage supper of the Lamb. It is, for all intents and purposes, a wedding invitation. I'm going to say that again. The blood moons, the solar eclipses in the heart of God are ultimately a wedding invitation. I think it's wonderful that these 4 blood moons that we're looking at now all coincide with a feast of Israel, whether it's Passover or the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Atonement, the beginning of the new year, all these different things. Ultimately, because we live in the New Testament, we're going to the marriage supper of the Lamb found in Revelation 19 and 9. And if you